The regular season is heating up, new stars are emerging, and that means more opportunities to win up to 25 times your cash on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection on a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's that easy. Let it fly to turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Watch your favorite players and get paid doing it this basketball season. See your entries make progress during the game or make new entries for the second half and the fourth quarter. 3-pointers, assists, rebounds, and everything in between are yours for the taking. Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
Are these your notes about what we're going to say?
That's a really good question.
Sculptor doesn't put their slab of clay or whatever on their plinth and then start doing the eyelashes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like gushing over your back.
What's first for everything? This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by one of LBA's agents, Hannah Schofield. Hello, Hannah. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Excellent. I mean, so happy to speak to you. How's everything going? How's your lead up to Christmas been?
It has been very busy. So the last week of November, I was like, I am so on top of things. Everything is under control. My December's going to be like a blitz. And then it sort of just hit me in the face. And I had the cold that everyone's got. Luckily, it wasn't COVID. So, but I was like not very well for a bit. And like so many authors wonderfully delivered their manuscripts to me. And then I went from like, oh, I can do everything I want before Christmas to be like, what can I push to January? How much can I push to January? So it's been busy, which is like fun, but I'm also like, wow, it's been a busy month.
Yeah. It's like, it's good to be busy, but also sometimes you just want to take a break, especially around Christmas.
Yes, I think lots of people are feeling that at the moment. Like lots of people, you know, it's been a hard year and people are thinking, I need to just wind down for the year. And I think that's hopefully going to be the case over the holiday break, that people will have that time to just chill out and, you know, read some books for pleasure.
That'd be
Imagine
nice.
that.
Let's talk about, you are a literary agent LBA as of 2018.
Sort of, yes. So I joined LBA in 2018 as the agency assistant.
Okay.
And so then the following year, I was promoted to junior agent, which meant that I could start working with my own clients. And I sort of inherited a couple from colleagues who then like joined my list and was sort of the start of my list. And then I, you know, started working with them, and I sort of came of age as an agent during lockdown 1 by sending out my first submission, which was quite scary, but quite exciting. And that book actually sold at auction. So that was a very good first submission experience, but just like totally bizarre for that to have happened during the pandemic. And that's kind of been my agenting journey since then. It's like all been during COVID, which is,
of course.
I've had to adapt to a different way of working, I think. And sort of strategize slightly differently as perhaps I would have done if I'd been working less so in a pandemic. But then, and then in this last summer, so summer 2021, was when I kind of got the full literary agent title. And so like my role now is very much like actively building my list of clients and hoping to find homes for their books.
Amazing. What an exciting couple of years. Dialing back just quickly, when you said something you said interesting to me there, when you moved from assistant to junior agent, you said you inherited a couple of authors of your colleagues. How does that work?
So a couple of the authors that joined me were authors who were writing in kind of the women's fiction space, which is something like I read in my personal time and like where I really loved, and weren't such a great fit for their previous agent in terms of genre. So I was like, oh yeah, perfect, this would be great. And one of those clients was actually the book I sold at auction. Like that was her book. Her name's Charlotte Butterfield. She's great. And so those were sort of the ones who were more established and had done a couple of books. And then while I was an assistant, I did basically the agency submissions, and I did a lot of kind of submissions from prizes, like, or the Faber anthology, like those sorts of things, trying to find new talent for the agency. And through those prizes, I mean, so LBA also runs a prize, which is the Daily Mail First Novel Competition. We've had a lot of success with that. So there were a couple of authors who were like runners up to that competition, who had like signed with the agency, but hadn't really kind of got going in their agent journey, or like had started it, and I sort of started to take over it, or like sort of mirror the editorial process with their agent. And then it became kind of obvious that it would be a natural fit for them to join my list, and thankfully they did. So that was great. So that was sort of how that worked out. I think I had maybe 5 or 6 clients, which sort of came to me like that, and that was like the start of my list. And then it was actually about a year ago, so November 2020, that I opened my own submissions inbox, because previously I'd been just like, you know, trawling through my colleagues, being like, what can I find here for me? So it was really fun to open my own, and that's how I found like most of my clients since then is via quote unquote the slush pile, which I don't really like that word, but that's how it works for me.
The submissions pile, let's say.
The submissions pile. Yeah, definitely. And like, I really love doing open submissions. I take a lot of care with it. I think it's a really sort of important part of my job, and one that I really value. So it's been fun. I've been enjoying doing that.
Yeah, it's a lot. It must be a lot to when you first go into that. I'm now open for submission, and you're getting all these emails filling up your inbox. It must be a lot to suddenly take on, though.
Yes. It is. I mean, obviously, as a younger agent, I probably don't get nearly as many submissions as some of my more senior colleagues and peers in the industry. Yeah. But even then, like some weeks, I'm like, how has this filled up so quickly? Like, so many people are writing to me, and so yeah, it is something I have to kind of actively keep on top of, but it ebbs and flows. Like some weeks I'll look at them every single day, and some weeks I'll be like, I have no time for this, I will do it next week. So yeah, right. I really use the maybe pile and like color coding. That's kind of the way that I manage that.
Amazing. I love a bit of color coding.
I love a bit of color coding.
I'm going to come back to submissions later.
Sure.
But before we get there, so you are quite new into being a literary agent. It's going to be interesting that your experience as a full-time literary agent has been in lockdown. So if we ever do get out of this, whatever this is, into a more, in quotes, normal situation, that will be an interesting learning curve for you.
Yeah, probably. I think actually the advantage for me of like kind of starting in lockdown means I've been able to meet so many more people than I would have done if I'd like sort of been touring the offices of publishing houses in London. Sure. Like being able to meet people on Zoom, even for like 20 minutes, half an hour, like here and there, has been invaluable. And I like, you have to have some gumption. So I'm like emailing editorial directors being like, hey, you don't know me, but you should have a call with me. And everyone's like really nice about that. So that's been great. And I think, so in the summer, I had my first like editor-author lunch, which was super exciting. And that was like the moment I was like, oh, this feels like this is what it could be. Because we'd done the book deal in about May, and I'd never met the author in person. So I signed her in January. We'd had a few Zoom calls, we'd done some edits together, and then we did the book deal with her editor, who I also hadn't met in person, but I'd like spoken to her quite a lot during lockdown, and it was like an editor I was really hoping to place something with. So then when we all went out to lunch together, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the fun part. This is what people have been talking about this whole time. Like finally. I'd been missing out on it. Yeah. So that was really fun. So I hope also one thing I'm really looking forward to kind of post lockdown, post pandemic, whatever, is being able to go to like a book launch for one of my authors. Like I think that will just be really special, because it has been really special to have like my authors' books come out this year. So 3 authors published this year. And like seeing the book in the flesh was just like so cool. But I think having, you know, that experience of like going out to celebrate a book, I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, no, definitely. A lot of my friends have had books out recently, and it's like, it's wonderful to hold the book in your hands and things like that. But because of lockdown, they haven't been able to have that same go to the bookshop, do a big launch event, that kind of thing.
Yes,
but
right.
Dialing back a bit, when did your journey into the publishing industry begin? Like, when did you decide you wanted to be a literary agent?
Right. So I've actually worked in publishing for 5 years now, which I realized the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. When I finished my undergraduate degree, which was in English, because of course it was, I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. So my now husband and all of my like close friends were all doing masters, and so I was like, cool, I'll do a master's too. This sounds great. And so I also did a master's in English, and that was at King's in London. And King's was really great at like putting on careers events, and one of them was about publishing, and it was like in London already, so I was sort of like in the mix a bit. And previously, like during my undergraduate, I'd had a class on children's literature, and Molly Kerr-Horn from the Bent Agency came to speak to our class about like working with children's authors. And like she just spoke about her job in this way that I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And she has like a proof copy of one of her clients' books, and I'd never seen a proof copy before. I didn't know they existed. And I was like, what is this like magical thing you talk of? Like, I must get involved in this. And at that time, the Bent Agency were running remote internships. So I applied twice for one with Molly. And then the following year, when I was doing my master's, I got on the remote internship. And so I was a manuscript reader for Molly for about 1.5 years, if I remember rightly, sort of alongside my master's degree. And that was sort of the moment I was like, okay, yes, this is for me, this is what I want to do. But obviously, like, I didn't know, it's not as easy as just like, oh, I'll just become a literary agent, like that's the end. Like, I kind of had to be a bit strategic about like how I was going to get into the industry. And so I started applying for stuff during the end of my degree, and I got a temporary position in the rights team at Vintage. So I did that in the summer, like as I was finishing my dissertation, and then like sort of started applying in earnest for things that autumn. And then my first full-time position was for a literary scout, which was a really great start in the industry, because literary scouts work for foreign publishers and sometimes also for like film and TV producers to kind of sift through everything that's on submission in the UK and like everything that's being published in the UK, and obviously there's like the US equivalent too, and try to find the gems for their clients. So they read everything, right? And they're in touch with agents and editors and rights professionals. And like at that time, I was like, okay, I think I want to be an editor or an agent or a rights professional. So I was like, perfect, I will know everyone. And then while I was doing that, I really, you know, it was a great start for me for many reasons. And I had fabulous colleagues who are still my friends. So it was a really, really nice place to start in the industry. But I just felt like agenting was going to be the right fit for me. And so when that was only like 1 year's traineeship that I did with the scouting company. So after that, I was like, okay, I'm only going to apply for agenting assistant roles now, because I knew that was the path that I wanted to take. And so then I landed at LBA the following year after a few, you know, false starts, unsuccessful interviews, like, you know how it is. But I was, really thrilled to land at LBA, and I've been there ever since.
Amazing. So it sounds like from being a MS reader and then a scout, you were very prepared to get into open submission and just go through those kinds of things. I
definitely read a lot, and I'm a very fast reader. And I I think probably for agents, you have to really trust your eye and trust your taste. And so like, I know what I like, I know what I don't like. And I've been honing that like over these years to even in my kind of like personal reading to be like, yes, I like this, no, I don't, and make those decisions quite quickly. So that helps me to get through the volume. But also I sort of rediscovered reading for pleasure after I've been at uni, which has sort of like dampened my enthusiasm a bit. And then I kind of got into it again when I was, starting my 20s. And then I just read tons. Like I never went anywhere without a book. And I discovered the Libby app, which if you don't know about it, like get on the Libby app. You can attach it to a library card. You get ebooks and audiobooks, and like you're never without a book. So
amazing.
I just like read tons and tons and tons. And I think that's something I still really try to prioritize, is sort of reading in the market, like what's working really well, like what's selling really well, what's kind of the sleeper hits, and just using all that information to, I guess, to inform how I approach editing my author's work and looking for new authors.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, right? Because if you're out of touch with what the industry is doing, then it's going to be very difficult for you to make the right choices and put the right feet forwards. Yes,
definitely. So that's something I always do. Although having said that, because it's been such a busy December, I haven't read as many books this year or like this month. But yeah, that will change when the holidays start. I've already got my holiday reading list, so I'm ready.
Amazing. I'm sure that it sounds like you've had a pretty smooth career kind of path into becoming an agent here, but I'm sure there were a few wrong turns on the way. What advice would you give to anybody looking to follow a similar career path?
I actually recently spoke to a panel I was on the panel at UCL for students, like on the kind of the other side of the coin. And I always find that quite a difficult question to answer, because I think so much of it is to do with like luck and timing.
Yeah.
But I think also resilience is key, like, and not taking rejection personally. And there are so many resources that are like really fabulous. I think you had Eleanor Rose on your podcast a few weeks ago, and like, she's fabulous. I watch her YouTube channel. And I think, people like her are doing really great work to make publishing feel more accessible, and like give tips on like how to, write a CV, write a cover letter. But I think sort of emotionally, I would really recommend, having confidence in yourself and being like, no, if this is the right fit for me and it is going to work out, even if it doesn't work out right away. And read a lot, even things that you don't think you will like read as much as you can, just to get a sense of like what's out there. For sure.
Yeah. I always find it very helpful to read outside of my own sort of preferences and genres like that, and often surprised, loads of people will recommend me a book, and I'll be dragging my feet about it. Then I'll finally get around to reading it, and then be like, "Oh, actually, turns out everyone was right. This is really good."
Yes, I had a similar thing with Where the Crawdads Sing, because I always get like a bit sort of dubious if there's like so much hype about something. And then my flatmate read it and was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! You have to read it." And I did, and I sort of like read it in a day, and then afterwards I was like, oh no, it's a masterpiece. They were right.
Yeah. Turns out everyone was right.
Everyone was right. It was brilliant. So yeah.
No, I'm exactly like that. And I think a lot of people are that way with the classics, and there's a sort of like, oh, they're old, like I'm not gonna get it, or whatever. And then you read it and you're like, God, it's so relatable. How is this so relatable from like so long ago?
Jane Austen was like the OG enemies to lovers trope. Like she invented it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I also once taught a sort of tutoring thing about how Northanger Abbey is a classic YA novel. So yeah, same vibes. I
like that take.
Reclaiming the classics for sure.
I like that. Okay, let's get back onto submissions, because this is something that I ask whenever I get agents on the podcast. I always ask these because it's interesting to know, and it's very helpful for anyone looking to submit to you and perhaps other agents as well. The submission package is synopsis, cover letter, first 3 chapters for fiction, cover letter, proposal, writing sample for nonfiction. So it's pretty standard at the LBA agency. When you receive a submission, what order do you go through the submission in, and where do you attribute the most weight?
Okay, so I always read the cover letter first, and I'll often read like lots in one go. Like I'll spend, half an hour, 45 minutes, like in my submission inbox, like kind of reading through. And on the query, like if there's something that jumps out at me, like if there's a really good one-line pitch, or if I love the comparison titles, or maybe it's like a little bit funny, or they've said something like, you tweeted about wanting this book and like my book is exactly that, then that will kind of make me sit up a bit straighter, and I'll like flag that as kind of to put in my maybe pile, and then if I'm like super interested and I read it and I'm like, oh my god, this is exactly what I want, I will go to the pages immediately and start reading immediately. But often what I do is I'll like put lots of things in my maybe pile, and then I'll like have kind of a sesh on the maybe pile, and then when I read those, I go back blind. So I don't read the letter again. I read the writing sample, and I'm like, does it hook me? Because I already know I like the concept. Does the writing hook me? And so that's how I kind of often get things out of the maybe pile, and also whether to call them in, because if I'm like really hooked by it, and then it doesn't take me long to know whether that's going to be kind of a yes or a no. And then after that, I'll check the synopsis to be like, does this person understand story structure? Like, is it going to be an exciting enough prospect? How much plot work do I think there's going to be? And I think, if the writing is strong enough, often plot stuff can be fixed. But if it's just, if it looks like it's going to be really hard, or if I read the plot and I'm like, oh, this is actually going in a different direction than like I would want it to go in, or like I would be sort of pitching it in, like clearly my direction is not what the author's going for here, then that also sort of tells me something. So query letter first, then writing sample, and then probably the second time around, writing sample, synopsis, and then I'll probably go back to the query letter. If I read something and I'm like, oh, why did I put this in my maybe pile? Then check again and be like, oh yeah, that's why.
Okay, so that's not one I've heard before. So you basically just go through cover letters en masse, and then that's where the color coordinating comes in, and so that the query letter, the pitch is of paramount importance when submitting to you.
Yes. I'll add though, just kind of quickly there, is I'll never, or unless something is like specifically a genre I do not represent, and I say in my Twitter bio, like, I do not represent this, I'll always look at the pages. Like, I'll never turn something down without looking, because you never know. Yeah. You never know if that's like going to be something like Where the Crawdads Sing, that I never would have thought this would be a book I would love. Yeah. So I think that's important. But yeah, like the query letter is key for sure.
Yeah. And when it comes to a query letter, what are you looking for? What's the sort of like how to of like what Hannah wants to see in a query letter?
For me, I don't think like making it too long is important. Like, I want it to be really quite short and give me the information quickly. So I want to know, like, what is the genre, what is the word count as kind of, the top line metadata, and then I'll want a couple of paragraphs about the pitch, maybe a one-line pitch or a one-line kind of hook, but really quite simple and to the point. And like, I always kind of give the, shorthand, and this has gone around, I'm sure, but like, who is your main character? What do they want? What's standing in the way? And what will happen if they don't get there? And I think that those questions, like the answers to those questions, just tell me what I need to know about a book, and tell me whether like I'm going to feel that the stakes are high enough. And I'm a very character-led reader. Like in lots of genres, like I read very widely and I enjoy books very widely, but I have to be in love with the character or characters to be like, this is something for me. So those kind of like really punchy query letters that tell me about the character and their wants and desires are really helpful. And then as well as that, like if you've got good comparison titles and if you've got comparison titles that I like, or if you've like pitched it in a quirky way, maybe like with a movie comparison or something like that, I'm like, oh, interesting. Like I wouldn't have thought those two comps would go together or something like that. Like that always makes me sort of excited. But basically, right. I just want as the top line notes of information in as quick time as possible. Like I don't need loads and loads of detail and loads of like that's what your synopsis is for. But yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So they're literally just like sell me the book in as few words as possible. Like get me excited to read the proposal.
Yeah, pretty much. And a good example of this is like a client I recently took on who had like followed up on something I tweeted about, being like, oh, I really enjoyed this book. Never Saw Me Coming, I think it's called, or Never Saw You Coming, by Vera Kurian. And she was like, I've also just read that book and I really loved it. And I think my book has something similar in it and here's why. And then she did like the kind of pitch for her book. And I was like, you're right. This sounds exactly the sort of thing I'm going to like. And that was true. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that worked out nicely for everyone, didn't it?
Yeah.
And how do you feel about people resubmitting a newer version of something they've already sent?
Unless I've specifically asked for it, that's not something I'll necessarily be very excited about. It's tricky that, because I think you can improve something like so much more if you do more edits and maybe you've got like other feedback. But there, like sometimes I'll get queries from people where like every month they send me the same book and I'm like, I'm sorry, this isn't for me. And so you're also slightly telling me then like no one else has offered on this.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, for your own, as an author, like for your own kind of buzz building and brand building, like I think it's quite important to be strategic about those sorts of things. Because I do remember like who has been querying me. I've got quite a good memory. So I do remember like the names of like, if I've read this, I'm like, oh, hang on, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
But I've also had things where like I've read full manuscripts and I'm like, okay, this isn't for me for X, Y reason. And I will write to the author and tell them why and like say, you know, this would be what I would want to do. But for one reason or another, I'm like, either really love their writing style or I do think, you know, they've got something. So I say to them, like, if you revise this in line with my notes, I'd love to see it again. Or if you have something else in the future, I'd love to see it again. So those sorts of resubmitting, I'm very much open to. But if, you know, I've just passed on something and you send it to me again and again and again, like I'm not going to be excited about it the third time, you know? So yeah.
I mean, I was picturing it more like if I were to send you something, let's say today, and then it wasn't for you, and then maybe in 6 months, a year's time, I sent you what was just the same core thing, but hugely overhauled, like perhaps different POV, or like it starts with a different chapter or something like that.
I feel like there's no harm in it for sure. But I wouldn't, I currently haven't had an experience where I've signed someone on the back of a resubmission, but that's not to say it can't work. Like I know definitely authors and agents who have found partnerships that way. So yeah, if you are doing the work on your manuscript, like that will always be good, and that will always help you in your kind of querying journey.
Yeah, but as a general rule, you would sort of advise perhaps to not do that unless you had been involved and said, listen, here are the changes that I think I would like, and if you're willing to do that, I would be willing to reread it.
Yeah, I think it's easier if it's off the back of like me having called in the first time. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm going to ask you if there's anything you're looking for at the moment, but I came across an interview that you did, and you said, "I'd love to find a brilliant British YA contemporary for the sex education audience, or that feels like a Taylor Swift song." And I read that and thought, sign me up. If you find that author, just send me an email. I'll buy a copy straight away. Sold.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like there's been a real renaissance in YA in the last couple of years, like mostly due to the kind of book talk phenomenon, which I'm really excited about, because I sort of, my first love when I got back into reading, got back in, or like started thinking about working in publishing, was YA, and that was what I was really excited about. And then it had a bit of a lull, and I was like, oh no, this sucks. Like, there's so much to be done in this space. So I'm really pleased that that like is kind of being re-energized, and a lot of the kind of fabulous things on book talks and things that have been sort of trending are backlist. And I'm like, okay, we need to kind of find some front list for all these new people who are reading. And so the sex education thing is because I just feel like we're missing a big British YA contemporary. And there's been like quite a few that we've had like tie-ins from the US, which have worked really well. But like, I just really feel like I haven't yet found that perfect British voice that I've really been on the hunt for. Like, I've really enjoyed Chinglish and the Chloe Seeger books. Like, I thought they were really great in that space, but I just want more. And the Taylor Swift thing is like, obviously everyone's getting back into Taylor Swift now. She's released her like Taylor's versions of her albums, and I'm like, the kind of the vibes and the nostalgia and the pining, like all of those, I just want in a novel, basically.
Sex education X Taylor Swift. That's what you want to see.
Sign me up. Yes.
Straight to the pages. So for everyone listening, what sort of books do you represent, and what do you not represent?
So I represent a like mix of things, but very much on kind of the quote unquote commercial end of the spectrum. So I love the sort of books which are like more plot driven and more character driven, and are never going to win the Booker Prize. That's just not my cup of tea. Like, not yet. Maybe one day. Well, maybe, but I don't feel like that's kind of my vibe. But like within commercial fiction, like I'm really quite open to a lot of things, like whether that's thriller or women's fiction or kind of like very tropey rom-com. But also I do a bit on the more sort of upmarket / book club space, where it's got that maybe talking point issue at its heart. Maybe the writing is a bit more kind of important to the package as a whole. But I'm always looking for stories and characters that I can fall in love with. And that's not necessarily prescribed by genre. What I don't really vibe with is sci-fi or like very sort of military thrillers. Like, it's one of those things, I think everyone has this, where they just have something that they like makes them go, oh, snooze. And my thing is like anything, it's like the CIA are hunting a flash drive, I'm like, oh, snooze. That's not my thing. But most other things, I'm kind of a never say never type person. Obviously I've put some stuff like in interviews about like what I especially love and what I'm like maybe not the right person for, but yeah, I think I'm pretty open.
And you do often tweet about things that you are looking for and talk about what you want.
Yeah, I do. And I think that's based on like what I've read recently or what I'm on the lookout for. And I was really in a thriller mood this autumn, and I'd read quite a lot, and I was like, oh, nothing's getting me, nothing's hooking me. And so that was like, and I'm still kind of looking for that. I found a really great YA thriller, which was the author I mentioned earlier. But like, I'd really love to find a very fresh thriller for the adult market, or like thriller / mystery, like anything in the Megan Miranda space. I would be really keen on.
Very cool. So it's pretty broad. You're open to most things, but it's YA and adult, right? You don't do children's.
I don't. I have co-agented a very great middle grade book, but that's not something I'm currently on the lookout for.
Okay. Well, I think that covers it. And that brings us to the final question, which is, Hannah, if you were stranded on a desert island with one book, which book would it be?
I know that every literary agent says that this gave them a crisis, but this also did give me a crisis. I actually asked my husband, I was like, what do you think I would take? And he said he thought I would take Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld, which I do. It's a Pride and Prejudice retelling set in Cincinnati in like 2012. And it's so funny. It's just so funny. And I reread it pretty much once a year. It's always like my hard times book is Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld. So that was a good choice. But like my probably favorite ever book, or like kind of the one that, you know, stuck with me since I was young, is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, which like I haven't reread that many times. So maybe if I was stuck on a desert island, it would be time to reread that one.
Yeah, but you might have reread the other one a few too many times. You can probably recite it at a certain point.
Yeah, well, yes, but I just think there's something wonderful about rereading.
Yeah.
There's no kind of discipline, like, you know, you're going to love it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about like, oh, is this going to be a waste of my time? No, it's going to be brilliant.
Okay, but you're gonna roll the dice and go with that.
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well, it's a great choice. I like how you really. It sounds like you really thought about it, considered several different options.
I did. Yeah, definitely. I have to like look at all my shelves and think which one would be the one.
It's a serious decision. I understand fully.
For sure.
For the rest of time, eternity.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much, Hannah, for coming on and sharing your experiences with the industry and telling us all about the books that you're looking for and things like that. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I think all of your questions, like on all the podcast episodes, have been so insightful, and I feel like I've learned so much from listening to it as well. So hopefully people will get something out of this one too.
Fingers crossed. I'm definitely getting something out of it. And for everyone listening, to keep up with everything that Hannah's doing, you can follow her on Twitter at Han Schofield. That's HANN Schofield. You can follow the LBA agency at LBA_agency. And if you're looking to submit, go to lbabooks.com. Make sure you read through the list of agents and see exactly what each of them is looking for and find the best one for you. And be sure to fulfill the submission guidelines, which are all written out on the website. To make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, you can follow us on Twitter at Right and Wrong UK and on Instagram at Right and Wrong Podcast. Thanks again, Hannah.
Thank you so much.
And thanks to everybody listening. We'll catch you in the next one.